Is the earth flat or is it round? A debate that has haunted man since the beginning of time and continues to rage well into the 21st century. Join me on my journey to uncover the truth through unbiased scientific experimentation. What makes this such a hotly contested issue, and why must the truth be known? Well, on one hand, if the earth is flat, then it is likely that we are here because of a higher power, that man was created with a purpose, and that the governments of the world, controlled secretly by such organizations as the Illuminati and Freemasons, are keeping this from us so they can exert their own control. On the other hand, if the earth is spherical and we are floating through an infinite universe, then man's entire existence is probably one of mere circumstance and randomness, and no one is in control. Uncovering the truth to this question is difficult to do. The information we receive and interpret on a daily basis comes from external sources. As to the credibility of these sources, that is up for debate. Where the government is concerned, yes, they control access to space. They control access to the South Pole. They also have a hand in the majority of the scientific research performed at universities and other institutions through grants and funding. Have they lied to us in the past? Yes. So can they be trusted with a question this important and this profound? Perhaps. The mainstream media has a way of presenting the same information multiple ways. Depending on which interpretation satisfies your bias, our collective view of the truth may vary greatly. They are also owned and paid for by extremely wealthy groups that may have an agenda. Information from the library contained in books, often regarded as trustworthy, may have limitations as well. It is said that history is written by the winner, and thorough research into the history of any war may confirm that, with the victor's interpretation prevailing as the truth, and the views of the defeated forgotten and buried under the sands of time. So is the information on the internet, is that the truth? Is there honesty on the internet? Perhaps, but there are so many sources, some credible, some not, that it becomes almost impossible to identify what is real and what isn't. So what are we left with? We're left with ourselves, with our individual observations and our interpretations of the truth. Through perceptible, rigorous scientific experiments, we can arrive at our own conclusions. And this is what we must do. In the early days of ship exploration, onlookers on a beach, watching a ship sail into the horizon away from them, noticed something strange. As they watched the ship get smaller and smaller, eventually the hull of the ship disappeared, while the masthead remained above the water. It was almost as if the ship was sinking into the ocean. They concluded that this was due to curvature in the earth. The higher you are above the surface of the sphere, the greater your field of view. An alternative conclusion can also be drawn that rationalizes this observation, and that is that the earth is flat, that we exist on a plane, and that it is not curvature that obscures the field of view of the ship. Rather, the ship eventually disappears due to the law of perception. In a flat earth model, it would not matter how high you rose above the plane, you would still be limited to the same range of vision. Meaning that if you had a high-powered lens that is more powerful than your own eye, you should be able to bring distant objects back into view, which would not be possible if the object was disappearing under curvature. So here's the setup. My ship is sailing away from me, directly into the horizon. The further it gets, the smaller it gets. But let's figure out why it's getting smaller. First of all, let's estimate the distance. We have a landmark to our right, and using the map at the beginning of this video, we can figure out an approximate distance for where the ship is at and where the island's at. On the seaofthieves.com forum page, a user took the time to estimate the length of a single grid square of the in-game map. He did this by finding a square that contained a bridge. He then went to the bridge and paced it out. Using an approximate human pace of 2.5 feet, he counted 37 paces across the bridge, for a total of 92.5 feet long. He then took a screenshot of that grid of the map, and individually counting the pixels, he measured the bridge at 44 pixels across. The grid length itself was 340 pixels across. Taking that ratio, he found that 7.5 bridges could fit across a single square. Multiplying that by 7.5 bridges, which could fit into a single grid length, he found that each length of a grid square was 693.75 feet. When converted to miles, that comes out to 0.1314 miles long. Applying that math to our in-game map, we can see that the island is approximately 7 squares lateral from us and 2 squares down, for a total grid length of 7.28. Multiplying that by 0.13 for the length of a single grid, it comes out to 0.96, or approximately 1 mile away from us. Now we can't tell how close the ship is to us because it's not a fixed object like the island. But what we can do is look at the shade of the island compared to the shade of the ship. We can see that the shade of the island is much darker than that of the ship, and we can infer that the island's closer. So we can assume fairly confidently that the ship is greater than 1 mile from us. Now, using an online Earth curve calculator, and assuming that our in-game character is 6 feet in height above sea level, when combining that with the character height and the height of the deck, a target distance of 1 mile should have no hidden features due to curvature. For us to begin to experience curvature, the ship has to approach a minimum of about 3 miles from us for curvature to start to obscure the hull of the ship. With these insights, we can now intelligently observe the ship sailing into the horizon. Using the naked eye, we can just barely make out the square ship sails. The rest of the ship is not visible to us. If we use the spyglass to zoom in, what happens? Using the spyglass brings the full ship back into view. And if you look closely, the ship appears to be slightly above the horizon. Taking a look at both these ships side by side shows major differences in their appearance. The ship on the left is from the spyglass, the ship on the right is from the naked eye. You can see immediate differences in their appearance. The ship on the left is more complete, it's proportional, you can see the entire hull. The ship on the right is disproportional. The hull is hardly visible, yet the masthead remains visible. Before we reach the conclusion of this experiment, I want to switch over to a second experiment involving the exact same objective. I used a different ship in a different part of the map and wanted to confirm what I found in the first experiment. This is what I saw. As the second ship grows smaller and sails into the horizon, we've once again lost sight of its hull. Using the spyglass, we can see that we bring the full ship back into view. So with everything that we've seen, is this the end of the experiment? Will the verdict be swayed towards one argument or the other? Not quite yet. Here's why. The reason this experiment is not concluded is because of what happens once both these ships go completely out of view, out of range of the naked eye, and out of range of the spyglass. Take a look. Suddenly, with no indication or warning, they both completely vanished. But why? As soon as I lost sight of the ship, I immediately traveled to it, dropped anchor, and went to the map. I needed to measure the distance between the beach and to the point where I lost sight of the ship. And what I found was shocking. I launched my ship from Plunder Outpost, and the ship sailed northeast. I measured the distance from the beach to the ship by counting the grids vertically 7 up and then horizontally 7 to the right, for a total distance of 9.9 grid squares. Multiplying that by 0.1314 miles per grid length came to only 1.3 miles. This means that the ship vanished after only traveling 1.3 miles. To achieve 3 miles, which is the minimum at which the curvature of the Earth should start to obscure the ship would have to travel at least 20 grid lengths, which is double the distance my ship traveled before I lost sight of it. It is important to note that during the second experiment with the second ship, a pirate, possibly a government agent, attempted to interfere with the experiment and obstruct my field of view. Now this by itself may not seem strange, but when you examine the details of who exactly publishes this game, it starts to make sense. Sea of Thieves, developed by Rare, is published by Microsoft Studios. Microsoft Studios, headed up and owned by Microsoft CEO Bill Gates, has recently been linked with efforts to create a new world order. So what exactly does this mean? Is this new world order attempting to hide flat Earth? To make it impossible for us to travel the length of 20 grids, so that way we can never reach a conclusion as to whether the Earth is spherical or flat? It's possible. So in conclusion, after performing a rigorous, thorough scientific experiment, and observing and perceiving firsthand everything laid out before us, we can definitively say without a doubt that the Earth is a